Hi guys, I'm Brandy. Welcome to my Uplands slideshow presentation. The first ecosystem I'll be starting with is the Masic Flatwoods. I had to do this assignment at the Arboretum, so I have a quarter shown in each of these photos to validate that I took them. My first species is the longleaf pine, or Pinus palustris. All pine trees look pretty similar to me, so I had a pretty hard time identifying this. I was able to identify by comparing its pine cone with other various cones on the bottom right. And notice how the longleaf pine typically has the largest cone. The oldest living longleaf pine is 466 years old in North Carolina. Next up is the spurred butterfly pea, or Centrosema virginianum. This is a species of vine that produces some pretty incredible flowers, so I find it fairly easy to identify. And there are 3 different species of butterfly pea that are native to Florida. This is the narrow-leaf blue-eyed grass, or Cicerenchium angustifolium. Blue-eyed grass is fairly easy to identify as they're pretty common in the Central Florida area. These flowers are in the iris family, and they were used by Native Americans as a medicinal plant. This is the Kunti palm, or Zamia integrifolia. The leaves of this plant are very different from the other plants around it, so it makes it fairly easy to identify. This is also a cycad, which are an ancient group of vascular plants. These were once a prominent component of the world's flora. This is the coastal plain staggerbush, or Lionia fruticosa. This is a close relative to the Lionia ferruginea, and they do look very similar. But the fruticosa leaves are flatter and the edges don't turn inward like the ferruginea does. And next up is the saw palmetto, or Serenoa repens. This is one of my favorite plants. The saw palmetto can live anywhere from 500 to 700 years old, and this is largely due to its incredible fire tolerance and adaptations to fire. The fruit of this plant has also been used medicinally by humans for centuries. This is the tall elephant's foot, or Elephantopus elatus. And this plant gets its name due to the leaves. They slightly resemble an elephant's footprint. This is the prickly paracactus, or Opuntia humifusa. These cacti can live well over 20 years, and they can bloom some pretty incredible flowers. The yellow flower on the bottom left is actually a photo that I took of some prickly pears while I was in Utah. And this is the gopher tortoise, or Gopherus polyphemus. Gopher tortoises can live in the wild for up to 60 years. Their burrows are used by around 350 other species for shelter and refuge from predators. This is one of the reasons they're considered ecosystem engineers and a keystone species. And this is the typhid wasp, Myxinum maculata. And they're sitting on some more elephant's foot. I found this species fairly easy to identify because of how narrow their bodies are compared to other wasps. And typhid wasps are considered flower wasps because they are actually minor pollinators. Here's another wasp, the thread-waisted wasp, Ammophila procera. This one is hanging out on some goldenrod. And the thread-waisted wasps are pretty distinct from other wasps because of their long abdomen, and they also have a bright orange stripe that runs across it. The thread-waisted wasps are ambush attackers. They can actually numb and paralyze their prey with a venomous sting. So while I was walking through the Arboretum, I recorded some birdsong, which I later identified to be the Carolina wren, or the Thryothoris ludovichianus. Carolina wren are versatile nesters. They've been known to nest in discarded flower pots, mailboxes, and even have been found nesting in an old coat pocket and boots. And here's the recording. And this is the hanging thief or robber fly, Diagomites salutans. These flies are ambush predators, and they'll actually hang from leaves with 1 or 2 legs to catch their prey. And I have a photo of this seen to the image on the right. And next up is the Florida scrub ecosystem. This is the British soldier lichen, Cladonia cristatella. And it's named for the red uniforms of British soldiers during the Revolutionary War. The red tops are actually spore-producing bodies, and they're believed to be red to ward off predators and protect the rest of the lichen from sun damage. Plus, they're pretty cool to look at. And this is biological soil crust. There's actually no scientific name for this species because biological soil crust is actually composed of a handful of different species, including lichen, fungi, and bacteria. Some biosoil crust can take thousands of years to grow. And if they're stepped on by humans, it can take a decade or more for the soil to recover. The photo on the right I actually took while I was in Utah. I included this to show an example of a large amount of biosoil crust, and also why it's important to stay on trail while hiking. And this is myrtle oak or Quercus myrtifolia. Myrtle oak looks very similar to the multiple other oak species found in scrub, so I was sure to take photos of the front and back of the leaves. I find myrtle oak is slightly easier to identify because it has round and smooth leaves compared to the leaves of sandlive or Chapman's oak. And this is sand pine or Pinus clausa. Sand pine are related to the Florida slash pine, but they don't grow nearly as tall. Sand pine also play an important role for around 20 species of threatened or endangered wildlife, including songbirds and woodpeckers. This is the rusty staggerbush, Rusty Lyonia or Lyonia ferruginea. The rust-colored hairs on this plant are believed to protect the plant's new growth from predators. And this is the scrub rosemary, Serratiola ericoide. This plant smells really good, but it's actually not edible. Scrub rosemary emits a chemical from its roots that will keep other seeds from germinating in its root zone. This is why you typically find rosemary in what's called a rosemary bald, where no other plants are crowding next to the rosemary. This is yaupon holly or Ilex vomitoria. The leaves and twigs contain caffeine, which American Indians used to prepare a tea. This was used ceremonially, and they would drink it in large quantities and then actually vomit the tea back up, which is what gave the plant species its name, vomitoria. However, the vomiting was actually self-induced or because of other ingredients added. The yaupon holly does not actually cause vomiting. The drink is still consumed today, and it tastes very similar to yerba mate, which is actually another type of holly. And this is scrub holly or Ilex opaca variation anicola. Many kinds of songbirds, game birds, and mammals eat the bitter berries of this and other hollies, but the fruits are actually poisonous to humans, so don't eat them. This is winged sumac or Rus copalina. While identifying, I thought this might be the Brazilian pepper tree, but the Brazilian pepper leaves are actually slightly spiky, and I have an image of that on the right, whereas the winged sumac leaves are very smooth. The winged sumac is named for the flat, leafy extensions along the midribs of the compound leaves, which you can also see on the image on the left. And this is the beloved Florida scrub jay, Aphelocoma coalitions. Scrub jays do not migrate, and they won't really travel unless it's through scrub habitat, so habitat fragmentation is a major threat to this species. Jays from the Atlantic coast, Central Florida, and Southwestern Florida have different vocalizations despite being separated by less than 100 miles. This is the restless bush cricket, Hapithus agitator. Male crickets tend to have a yellow stripe on either side, and you can slightly see that in the image here, so I believe this is a male cricket. This is the Florida garden spider, or Ergope florida. The web of the garden spider contains a highly visible zigzagging X-shaped pattern, which you can kind of see on the bottom and the top of the photo, and this is actually called a stabilimentum. The exact function of the stabilimentum is still not known, but its purpose might be to alert birds of the presence of the web, so that way the bird doesn't fly through it and destroy it by mistake. And I've seen this technique adapted by several other spider species. This is the Florida harvester ant, or Paganomyrmex badius. Harvester ant workers can be found collecting seeds as far as 50 to 60 kilometers from their nest. They use their chemical scent trails to navigate back to the nest. Harvester ants are also known to aid in seed dispersal via a technique called myrmecochory. And we are finally to the last ecosystem, the hardwood hammock. This is the resurrection fern, or Pleopeltis michoiana. Most plants can lose only 10% of their water content before they die, but this fern can lose up to 97% of its water without dying, and it can even survive in its dry state for 100 years. This is the southern live oak, or Quercus virginiana. Crowns of the largest southern live oaks can reach diameters of 150 feet. This is nearly large enough to encompass half of a football field. The threatened Florida scrub jay relies on the scrub form of this southern live oak for its nesting. This is the saw greenbrier, or Smilax boninox. Roots of one of the Caribbean species were used in the original making of sarsaparilla, which is a type of soft drink. And then during the Civil War, Southern forces fermented the roots, and they were able to make a type of weak beer from it. This is the American beauty berry, or Calicarpa americana. The roots, leaves, and branches were used by various Native American tribes for medicinal purposes to treat malarial fevers, rheumatisms, dizziness, stomach aches, and even dysentery. In the early 20th century, farmers would crush the leaves and place them underneath the harnesses of horses and mules to repel mosquitoes and other biting bugs. And this is conifer mazegill, Gliophilum saparium. I actually thought this was similar to the false turkeytail species. However, the underside has gills, and these are not found on turkeytail. I found it really does help to get all angles in photos, especially with fungi. This is the forked blue curl, Trichostema dichotomum. The curled stamen of this flower actually helps it distribute more pollen. So when a bee lands on the flower to get nectar, the curled stamen is more likely to touch the bee's back, which covers the bee in pollen, and then the pollen will be carried over to the next flower. And this is meadow beauty, or Rexia mariana. Meadow beauty flowers are within the 9% of flowers that use the buzz pollination technique. Buzz pollination is a result of how the flower stores its pollen. It forces the bee to buzz or vibrate, which allows the pollen to dislodge, and I have a little photo on the right showing this. This is the red-shouldered hawk, Buteo lineatus. Red-shouldered hawks are very common in Florida and are really easy to identify based on their call. Blue jays will also mimic their call, possibly to alert or scare off other animals. And this is a video I took of the red-shouldered hawk flying around and calling. This is the spiny-backed orb weaver, Gasteracantha cacrophrormis. And this spider is really easy to identify due to its unique coloring. The spiny back gets its name from those 6 red spikes that you can see on its back. And this is a species of mason wasp, or Zethus spinipes. Zethus will use either abandoned burrows of other insects, or they will build nests from vegetable matter and resin. And this is the green heron, Butyrides virescens. This one, I believe, is a juvenile based on the markings on its side. The American bittern is a really similar looking species, which I have a photo of in the middle. However, I still think it's a green heron based on the wing and head markings. Another visually similar species is the black-crested night heron. However, Sibley's field guide noted that the night herons don't usually stretch out their neck like this one in the photo. Alright, that's the end of my slideshow. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for watching.